Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Moreh Yiskah, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Hallelujah, for this is the day that Yahuwah has made, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it. Hallelujah. And so I'm so excited that I'm able to do this Paleo, intro to Paleo class. And so what I'm doing here is, if you're seeing this video, you are probably on the Banana Learning platform. And if you're on that platform and you're at this particular video, then I'm sure that you have noticed that there is a PDF file which you can print off, and you can actually follow along with the video a little bit. There's some things on the printout that's not on the video, but you still will be able to follow along. I know there's people learn differently, and so I wanted to have it written down, but I also want to have like a video of me going through and explaining it, and maybe have you have a few pictures and things like that in order to fully understand and to fully grasp what I'm saying here. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just get started, and I'm going to go through this, and hopefully I don't take up much of your time, but I do want to be thorough in order for you to get the point. Okay. Okay. So this is Introduction to Paleo Hebrew, which this particular class, the first class, is Ancient Hebrew Thoughts, and we're going to go through what it is to think anciently, to think like a Hebrew, basically ancient Hebrew. Okay. And so let's just go ahead and get into it. Okay, so here is a quote from Prologue to Ecclesiasticus. And if you've never read Ecclesiasticus is a book that is in the Apocrypha. Okay, it's also, some people call it Sirach. So it's Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, depending on who you ask or who's telling you about it. But either way, this is Ecclesiasticus has a prologue in it. Right before it starts with chapter 1, depending on if you have a Sefer or you have the little red book, King James Version, or if you have, I don't know, I guess there may be some other copies out there or some internet versions. Depending on what version you have, it could be the chapter 1 or it could be the prologue. You could call it the prologue to Ecclesiasticus. It kind of gives you like a background of the book and what the book's about and who the book's about and how it came to be that it was put in this form. And so, like I said, before the book itself starts, it has a prologue, and it's a little bit longer. But what I thought that this was a really, really good quote from that portion, because it really sums up a lot, and it says a lot here. It says, "For the same things uttered in Hebrew and translated into another tongue have not the same force in them. And not only these things, but the Torah itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language." And so, this is a really, really big statement to make. It's saying that when you translate Hebrew, it loses some of the Hebraicness. It loses some force. It loses some power behind it, because in Hebrew things mean things. And so it loses some of that. And it says it has no small difference. It doesn't have a small difference. It has a major difference when they are spoken the way it was intended to be spoken, in the language that it was created in. And so as we go through this course, we will see more of that. So, like I said, as we dig into Hebrew, we will see how true this statement is, right? There is a certain power, there's a certain understanding in Hebrew that isn't easily expressed in English. And sometimes, as I'm translating words from Hebrew to English, it can be kind of laborious to accurately get the point across, So, I mean, I can see the Hebrew words in my mind, but many times the words to express it in English just don't exist, or it don't do it justice, or you may have to say a lot more than what you would have to say in the Hebrew way. Okay. And so ancient Hebrew thought, so it's important to remember, okay, the definition of a word is going to be directly related to the culture in which that word is being used. And so again, if you're on the learning platform and you have a have looked at the PDF or you see it there, I would say print it out, because I'm basically going over the PDF right now as we're going through this. So you could follow along and read along with me if you had the PDF. Okay. Okay. So one word may have many different meanings depending on the culture that is using it. In order to place the correct context to a Hebrew word from the ancient Hebrew language, one must first understand ancient Hebrew thought. And this quote came from the ancient Hebrew lexicon, okay? So, you know, this is what we have been guilty of doing in the past when reading the scriptures. We read it without context of culture. We automatically assume that since we recognize a word, it must mean what the society we have been assimilated to says it means, right? The scriptures the scriptures were written to a group of people, the Hebrew people. Therefore, we must ask the Hebrews what the words mean, not the Englishmen, okay? We have all been raised to have a Greco-Roman mindset. With this mindset, we move with our own personal philosophy, almost like fluid thinking. Nothing really set in stone. With this mindset, you can ask 10 people to define a word and get several different, oftentimes opposing answers. The Hebrew language is concrete. It sticks across the board. This is why the Hebrew scriptures can be passed from generation to generation. If you want to understand a language, you must understand the culture of the people of that language. There is a lot missed in translation because many Hebrew words can't be properly translated. Okay? So here you see the word tent peg. So let's go and see what we have here. Okay. A person from another culture will more than likely stumble in understanding Hebrew because our language is intertwined with our culture. The letter Y represents a tent peg. If your culture doesn't dwell in tents, you will not understand the functionality of this letter. What does a tent peg do? A tent peg secures the tent to the ground. It gives stability. The word faith in Hebrew is emunah. In the center of the word is the letter Y, the tent peg. This gives a clue that the word faith means more than just believing. When our ancestors saw the word emunah, they knew that having the letter Y in the word, faith was about steadfastness, stability, being grounded, and having roots. Faith is a work because the tent peg is working. If it stops working, when the winds and storms come, the tent will be taken away. There are many factors that go into a translation which are invisible and unknown to the reader of the translation. Most Bible readers assume the English translation of the Bible is an equivalent and exact representation of the original text. Because of the vast difference between the ancient Hebrew language and our own that we've learned or picked up, as well as the differences in the two cultures, an exact translation is impossible. The difficult job of a translator is to bridge the gap between the languages and culture. Since one can translate the Hebrew text many different ways, the translator's personal beliefs will often dictate how the text is translated. A translation of the biblical text is a translator's interpretation of the original text based on his own theology and doctrine. This forces the reader to use the translator's understanding of the text as his foundation for the text. For this reason, readers will often compare translations, but are usually limited to Christian translations. I always recommend, and he's saying he always recommends, I'm not saying that this is a quote from him. He says, I always recommend including a Jewish translation when comparing text, as this will give a translation from a different perspective. Yes, it will be biased toward the Jewish faith, but Christian translations are biased toward the Christian faith as well. A comparison of the two translations can help to discover the bias of each. The translator's task is compounded by by the presence of words and phrases whose original meanings have been lost. In these cases, the translators will attempt to interpret the words and phrases as best as possible based on the context of the word and the translator's opinion of what the author was attempting to convey. When the reader of the translation comes across the translator's attempt to translate the difficult text, the reader almost always makes the assumption the translator has accurately translated the text. The following passage will give an example of some of the difficulties the translators face when attempting to convert the Hebrew text into an understandable English rendering. Okay. So Genesis 6:16 says, make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. That's Genesis 6:16. Okay. The above translation seems very clear, concise, and understandable. The reader would have no problem understanding the meaning of the text and assumes this translation adequately represents the original text. Behind this translation lies the Hebrew, which must be a translator's nightmare. Below is a literal rendering of the same verse according to the Hebrew. So what it really says in Hebrew, a light you do to an ark, and to a cubit you complete it from it over it, and a door of the ark in its side you put under 20 and 30 you do. Again, let's see if we can get that. A light you do to an ark, and to a cubit you complete it, from it over it, and a door of the ark in its side you put under 20 and 30 you do. Okay, still don't have it. Okay, me either. So, this is not an isolated case, but occurs continually throughout the biblical text. Okay? In order to assist the English reader, the translator has supplied words, phrases, and even whole sentences, okay, to enable the reader to understand the text. The reader is rarely aware of the difficulties in translating a certain passage and assumes the translator has accurately translated the text. Okay? Okay. So we're going to move on to abstract and concrete. This is the difference in how we have been trained to think and how our ancient ancestors thought. Okay. Greek thought views the world through the mind. Abstract thought, which is abstract thought, Ancient Hebrew thought views the world through the senses, concrete thought. Concrete thought is the expression of concepts and ideas in ways that can be seen, touched, smelled, tasted, and heard. All five of the senses are used when speaking, hearing, writing, and reading the Hebrew language. So there's Greek thought, which is abstract, which is about like philosophy. And then there's concrete thought, which has to do with senses, such as, like they say, to be seen, can be touched, smelled, tasted, and heard. Okay? All right. So an example of this can be found in Psalms 1:3. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither. In this passage, the author expresses his thoughts in concrete terms such as tree, streams of water, fruit, and leaf. Abstract thought is the expression of concepts and ideas in ways that cannot be seen, touched, smelled, tasted, or heard. Okay? Examples of abstract thought can be found in Psalms 103:8. Yahuwah is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. The word compassion, grace, anger, and love are all abstract words, ideas that cannot be experienced by the senses. Why do we find these abstract words in a passage of concrete thinking Hebrews? Actually, these are abstract English words used to translate the original Hebrew concrete words. The translators often translate this way because the original Hebrew makes no sense when literally translated into English. Okay. Let us take one of the above abstract words to demonstrate the translation from a concrete Hebrew word to the abstract English word. Anger. Okay, we just saw that about being slow to anger, right? So, anger, an abstract word. It's actually the Hebrew word aleph peh, off, or aleph, depending on how you pronounce it, which literally means nose, a concrete word. When one is very angry, he begins to breathe hard and the nostrils begin to flare. A Hebrew sees anger as the flaring of the nose, nostrils. If the translator literally translated the above passage as slow to nose, the English reader would not understand. Okay? And so here I like to say that I know that the translators did a massive cover-up job when it comes to the scriptures, but we must also acknowledge that there isn't a completely accurate way to translate it into English. Okay, what has been written in Hebrew to our people, I mean, it's no way that we can completely translate it the way it was intended to be conveyed. So if the scriptures were written accurately, since we are assimilated into this culture, we wouldn't understand the scriptures. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. Okay. So another difference is appearance and functional descriptions. Okay. So, okay. All right. So a Greek thought describes objects in relation to its appearance. Hebrew thought describes objects in relation to its function. Okay. A Greek description of a common pencil would be, it is yellow and about 8 inches long. A Hebrew description of the pencil would be related to its function, such as I write words with it. Notice the Hebrew description uses the verb write. A verb expresses an action or state of being, okay? The Greek description uses the adjectives yellow and long. An adjective describes or modifies a noun, which is a person, place, or thing, right? Because the Hebrew language uses functional descriptions, verbs are used much more frequently than adjectives. To our Greek way of thinking, a deer and an oak are two very different objects, and we would never describe them in the same way. Okay, so here we see a deer stag and we see an oak, okay? The Hebrew word for both of these objects is ayil. Because the functional description of the two objects are identical to the Hebrews, therefore the same Hebrew word is used for both. The Hebraic definition, ayil, is a strong leader. A deer stag is one of the most powerful animals of the forest and is seen as a strong leader among the other animals of the forest. The wood of the oak tree is very hard compared to other trees and is seen as a strong leader among the trees of the forest. Notice the two different translations of the Hebrew word ayil. So Psalms 29:9 says, this is in the NASB and the KJV translated as, the voice of Yahuwah makes the deer clap. While the NIV translated as, the voice of Yahuwah twists the oaks. The literal translation of this verse in Hebrew thought would be, the voice of Yahuwah makes the strong leaders turn. When translating the Hebrew into English, the Greek thinking translator will give a Greek description to this word for the Greek thinking reader, which is why we have two different ways of translating this verse. This same word, Aiel, is also translated as a ruler, a strong leader of men in 2 Kings 24 and 15. Okay. Ancient Hebrew will use different Hebrew words for the same thing depending on its function. Okay? For example, an ox may be identified as an aluf when referring to a lead ox. Okay? A shore when referring to a plow ox. A bakor when referring to an ox of the field, or a pair when referring to an ox of the threshing floor. Okay, and this is also very common. I wanted to say that Hebrew is very specific. Okay, and so this is even true when it comes to praise, right? About having different words for different things. So in English, when we say, oh, we praise the Most High, that we have the word praise. Well, in Hebrew, there are different types of praise, okay, depending on what you're doing. So, we all know about hallelujah. So it's hallel, which is to be clear, to praise, to shine, to boast, to show, to rave, to celebrate. Then there's yada, which is to the extended hand, to throw out the hand. Therefore, to worship with the extended hands, to lift the hands. Then you have todah, which is an extension of the hand in adoration, a vow or acceptance. Shabbat, which is to shout, to address in a loud tone, to command, to triumph. Barak, to kneel down, to bless Elohim as an act of adoration, to salute. Zamar, to pluck with the strings of an instrument, to sing, to praise, a musical word which is largely involved with joyful expressions of music with musical instruments. And then Tehillah, the singing of Hallels, to sing or to loud, proceed to involve music, especially singing, hymns of the spirit, and praise. Okay? All right. So these are different. A lot of times in Hebrew, it's not just one type. It has different elements to it. So when we say praise, it's like, well, what exactly does this mean in this particular instance, right? And the same thing with this ox. This is an ox, but what does this ox do? And but depending on the function of the ox, depends on what they call the ox. So they can be very specific. Okay. All right. All right. So the next thing that's different is static and dynamic. In our modern Western language, verbs express action, which are dynamic, while nouns express inanimate objects, which are static. Okay? In Hebrew, all things are in motion, dynamic, including verbs and nouns. In Hebrew sentences, the verbs identify the action of the object, while nouns identify an object that is performing the action. Okay? So here on the screen, you see the verb malak. Let's go there first. The verb malak. Okay? That's a verb. Malak. Malak is a verb. Malak. Okay? That is the reign of the king. Okay? That's the verb. While the noun melek is the king who reigns. Okay? So you have the king, melek, who is the person or the place, the thing. So the person here. Then you have the malak, which is about the reign or the rulership or the seat of judgment. Okay? So everything is in motion. Like the king, you know what it is to be a king, and then you also know what it is to be in rulership or to sit in the seat of judgment. So everything is dynamic. Okay. A mountaintop is not just a static object, but the head lifting out of the hill. So it's like Hebrew mindset sees everything as like doing something. Nothing is just there. It's doing something. So the mountain is like a head that's lifting out of a hill. They see it as a head lifting out of the hill, not just as a mountain that's a static object that has no, just in their mind, they see it as something. They see it as doing something, okay? So a good example of action in what appears to be a static passage is the command to have no other Elohim before me. That's in Exodus 20:3. In Hebrew thought, this passage is saying not to bring another one of power in front of my face. And I'll say that many of us thought that Exodus 23:3 simply meant to put God first. Although that's a biblical principle, this verse is saying much more. Elohim is telling us not to parade another Elohim in front of him. We say we are married to him, but we are parading another Elohim in front of him. He says he's not going to put up with it. Okay? So everything he has ever told us, every word that is in the scripture that is a Hebrew word, all has movement, is dynamic. It is doing something. It is not just a level of words where you can just kind of create this philosophical idea in your mind, and that's what it is. It has it has expectation. Every word has expectation, and every word does what it's supposed to do. And so that's a major difference. Okay, so we've discovered those differences in the way we've been taught to think and what the way our ancestors thought. So we discovered that, we're not that Greek thought is abstract, and that we are to be thinking like in concrete terms. We discovered that we don't judge just things about by appearance, but we are those that are about function. We talked about that we're not static, but we are dynamic. Okay, so those are the major differences that cause us to sometimes not understand the scripture or not understand words when it comes to Hebrew, is because we still try to come from that Greek mindset of philosophicalness and not going into the senses of what something is doing. We are very action-oriented people. To say I love you means something. I do because I love you. There is some action that comes because of that. And you know that I love you because of the action of my love. It's not a this thing in your mind that you can kind of say, well, I can create what it is in my. No, everyone knows what it is because it's there in the word, and the word is moving. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that the word is moving, the word is working, the word is doing something, always dynamic, never just sitting, never just philosophical. Okay, all right. So I think I got that home. Okay, so this is we're soon to close, and so I just wanted to go ahead and just let you know about this. So let's see, letter characteristics of the Hebrew language. Okay, we usually associate two characteristics for each letter: a form and a sound, as in the first letter of our alphabet, whose form is A and has a sound of A or The ancient Hebrew alphabet has four characteristics: form, sound, name, and meaning. Okay? Okay. So, form. The form is how the letter looks. Okay? The original letter is pictographic, meaning it represents a picture of something, such as the letter P representing a mouth. We'll get to that later on in the class, but in the another future class. Many times the Hebrew culture will reveal the meaning of the picture. For example, the pictograph Beit is named Beit, which means, or Beit, which means house. Okay? Beit means house. The connection between the pictograph and the name is lost without knowledge of the ancient houses made of tents, as the pictograph is a perfect representation of the floor plan of the tent. So again, form. When you digging back and you go back to like the early the pictographs of it, a lot of times what you'll see is you'll see that the letters really look like what it says that the word means. So it gives you more of a clue as to what it means to that culture. And like I said, the word, the letter bait is a picture. The letter bait means house, or bait means house in Hebrew. But just even the way the letter bait in the pictograph is drawn, the way it is drawn is the floor plan of the tent. So it gives you a clue as to what's going on in that tent. And so when we get to bait, which we'll get there next week, I'm going to go over that tent so you can see how that tent looks and what that tent's about. Okay. All right. Another thing is the name. Okay. The name is what the letter is called. I mean, I know these definitions are very simple, simplistic, and I know you know what the word name is, what it's called. But I just wanted to put that there. Each pictograph is associated with a single syllable of two consonants. Now, I say that, but depending on who you ask, because see, you have, it just depends on how you're saying the word. Like sometimes, it'll be all or aleph. So it just depends on if you're going to say go really ancient where you just got two letters, or you're going to have four letters depending on depending on what you're calling the letter. So all or aleph, depending on who you talk to. It could be either or. Okay, just want to let you know, because I want to make sure also in this course that when you get finished with it, you won't be thrown off by what someone else may say about the letters. That you'll have kind of like a working understanding of how to navigate through that and the differences. Okay. So the syllable is also the name of the letter. So the name of the letter pay is pay, and is also the Hebrew word for mouth. Okay. What the pictograph represents is the first clue to what the name of the letter is. For example, the letter ayin is an I. Okay, the Hebrew word for I is ayin, and is the modern name for this letter. Okay, so it's kind of, once we get into it, you'll begin to see, and I know many of you probably have already begun to see, but I just wanted to put that there. Okay, next is meaning. The meaning is outside of the basic form meaning, right? What does the letter mean? And what I mean by that is every pictograph will have a meaning associated, or it could have a word associated with it. But the meaning of the letter is extended past just that, oh, it means house. What does that house represent? Okay. And so here it says the meaning of a pictograph is the extended meaning related to the pictograph. These mnemonic meanings most often are related to a pictograph by their function rather than appearance. For example, the letter pay has the extended meaning speak, blow, open functions of the mouth. So again, so to break this down better, you have the pictograph pay. Okay. I know many of you now are like, what is the pay? And I should have put it here, but I'm sorry. But it's like it's a picture of a mouth. Okay. All right. So we know pay means that pay means mouth. We know that pay means mouth. Okay. But beyond it just meaning mouth, what else does it mean? So it means the functions of the mouth. Okay, so it also could mean to speak. What do you do with your mouth? You speak, you blow, you open your mouth. So it's different functions of the mouth. That's also the meaning of the word. Not just mouth. It means mouth, sure. But what are the other meanings associated with that? Okay. The next one is sound. The sound is what sound does the letter make? The first letter of the syllabic name provides a singular sound for the purpose of forming words and sentences. So the phonic value of the letter P is therefore P, which makes the P sound. Or now it makes the sound as well, PH or P sound, but we're not gonna really get into that. I just wanted to let you know that typically it makes the sound that like a bait makes B, sound. So, and we're going to get more into that as we go along. And here you see like a little picture. That's not my picture. I just put that there so you can see that there's different types of ways that you can write the script. Okay. Those are the different forms that it can be written in. Okay. So we're done with the class, but takeaways from this class. Okay. All right. There is a certain power and understanding in Hebrew that isn't easily expressed in English. Okay. The definition of a word is going to be directly related to the culture in which that word is being used. Ancient Hebrew thought views the world through the senses, concrete thought. Concrete thought is the expression of concepts and ideas in ways that can be seen, touched, smelled, tasted, or heard. All five of the senses are used when speaking, hearing, writing, and reading the Hebrew language. Greek thought describes objects in relation to its appearance. Hebrew thought describes objects in relation to its function. Ancient Hebrew will use different Hebrew words for the same thing depending on its function at the time. In Hebrew, all things are in motion, dynamic, including verbs and nouns. Hebrew alphabet has four characteristics: form, sound, name, and meaning. Okay? So I have some homework questions for you. Now I'm also gonna take. I'm gonna make this as a separate PDF. I'm gonna have it in here as well. Your homework assignment for you to do, and I will also below it I will leave instructions on how to get this homework assignment to me. Okay. So I'll just go over the questions right quick. It says fill in the blank. If you want to understand a language, you must blank. What is the difference between abstract thought and concrete thought? True or false? A translation of the biblical text is a translator's interpretation of the original text based on his own theology and doctrine. Did our ancestors think concrete or abstract? Fill in the blank. Greek thought describes objects in relation to its appearance. Hebrew thought describes objects blank. True or false? In Hebrew, all things are static. Define these words: form, name, meaning, sound. And paragraph. Why did you decide to participate in the Introduction to Paleo class? Okay. All right. What you can expect from the Hebrew alphabet classes. Okay. So this is starting next time we meet is introduction to each Hebrew letter. So what I'm going to do next week, we're going to try to take 5 letters. And so I'm going to introduce 5 letters to you next week. Okay. You're going to be introduced to them. You're going to gain understanding of the culture behind each letter. So I'm going to bring some cultural aspects to the letter so you can see how these letters interact in our culture and why these certain I guess tools or certain things were so important that they needed to be in our alphabet. So important to daily life that they had to be in our alphabet and represent something important. Okay. 3, learn the meaning of each Hebrew letter, of course, and then learn common Hebrew words associated with each letter. So there's going to be certain words that we're going to learn throughout this so you can see, and maybe you can even start using some of these words. And some of these words you're probably already using, so that's good. But we're going to try to increase our vocabulary as we go along. So here are some recommendations. Okay. I would recommend you get a 3-ring binder to put your notes in, or a folder. If you can't get a 3-ring binder, get a folder. Okay. What I would do is I would start making flashcards, and what I would do is as we go through each letter, I will make flashcards for each letter, and again study daily. So every day that you have some time. I'm not talking about a long time. I mean, I'm just saying 5 or 10 minutes every day. Just sit down with your flashcards and just go over your notes and drink in of this information. This is an introduction class, okay? So it's not like it's going to be a lot of, I just want to give you a good foundation so that as you go into different, another paleo class, as you go into Paleo 1 or even Paleo 2 or whatever your goals are for Paleo, or even in Hebrew, whatever you decide to do. I just want you to have a solid foundation. I don't want this class to be too taxing, but I also, yes, what I want you to do also, and I'll make sure if this is a live class, I'm not sure if these classes will be live or not. If you're a part of one of my live classes, I want to make sure that your homework assignment for the previous week is turned in at least the date of before the class starts for the next week. So if this is Sunday, then your homework assignment will be due Sunday before the live class for next week starts. So I want to make sure that you don't just sit on these homework assignments and let them build up. My prayer is that you would continue to be on it and continue to come to class and to continue to learn and, grow. So that's the intention behind this class. And so make sure that's it. And so I just want to congratulate you for taking this class. I know, you've stepped outside of yourself and doing something new, and sometimes it can be, it can be challenging, but hallelujah, I'm so thankful that, you've stepped out. And so with that, I will say shalom, and I will see you on the next video. Shalom.